Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Covington City Council meeting for Tuesday, November 14th. In compliance with state law, City Council special and regular meetings are being held in a hybrid format with in-person, telephonic, and virtual options for public viewing and participation. With that, we'll call this meeting to order. And Chris, if you could please call the roll.
Councilmember Soltis. Councilmember Porter.
Here.
Councilmember Hartsock.
Here.
Councilmember Hargenhausen.
Present.
Councilmember Simomo.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Here.
Mayor Wagner.
Present.
We have a quorum, Your Honor.
Thank you, Krista. If everybody could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first up is approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes tonight, Regan?
No changes, Mayor.
Thank you. Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor state aye. Any opposed? The agenda has been approved.
Mr. Mayor, do we need to have a motion to excuse Christina?
Yes, thank you. Is there a motion to excuse Christina?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to excuse Christina Soltis. All those in favor state aye.
Mayor, sorry, I did want to point out, we are going into executive session as our
Okay,
informed.
so we will have an executive session at the end of this meeting, before the end of the meeting. Joe, thank you for bringing that up. All right, now, public communication, Holly is here to give us a legislative report. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you all. Good evening, council. I am Holly Sanabria, formerly Coachee. I just got married in October. So
Congratulations.
new last name. I have the privilege of serving the city as the city's state lobbyist, and I am joining you all this evening to talk about the city's preparation for the 2024 state legislative session. So we will begin. We can go to the next slide. I'll first provide a general overview of what to expect for the 2024 legislative session, then review the city's legislative agenda and policy document that you all have already approved, and I'll wrap up by talking about next steps. We can go to the next slide. The 2024 session will be a short 60-day session, the second year of the biennium. So as a reminder, odd numbered years are long 105-day sessions, and even numbered years are short 60-day sessions. Since it is a non-budget year, the legislature's primary objective during a short session is to adopt supplemental budgets, so operating, capital, and transportation budgets. Supplemental budgets are designed to make small changes to the biennial budgets or what the legislature adopted in the previous session and account for changes in revenue projections and program or project costs. The most recent operating budget forecast shows the state has roughly 900 million more than what was anticipated when the budget was adopted. Meanwhile, transportation projects around the state are continuing to come in higher than they were estimated and received funding for in the current budget. So legislators will need to determine how to manage these costs. WashDOT is estimating that project costs are upwards of 30% more than what was appropriated. So more to come on that later when we discuss the city's transportation priorities. And the capital budget has roughly 95 million in remaining bonding capacity. Every bill that was introduced in the 2023 session that did not pass will be automatically reintroduced, and legislators can also introduce new bills. Typically, we do not see controversial bills advance during the short session because the following after the 2024 session, we have the 2024 elections. We expect the election will bring a shift in people to the Senate and the House. On average, there is about a 30% change in legislative representation every election cycle. So this may or may not mean that districts will flip or majorities will change, but districts will have new faces and new representations in the legislature following the election. Every member of the House and half the Senate will be up for re-election in November 2024. Currently, Democrats still hold strong majorities in both chambers. And in general, committee assignments and chairs will remain the same as last year. The one exception is that Senator Christine Rolfes, Chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee and lead operating budget writer in the Senate, has resigned from her position, and she is serving as the Kitsap County Commission on the Kitsap County Commission. And then her role as lead budget writer will be filled by Vice Chair Senator June Robinson from Everett. So we can go to the next slide. Traditionally, the city's legislative agenda is separated into two different sections: the city's top legislative priorities and then the policy document. Both serve an important purpose, and I certainly recommend that we continue to structure the city's legislative agenda in this way. We can go to the next slide. The first section being the city's top priority issues, which you all have approved and have seen, so I'll just briefly go over them. These issues are what I spend the bulk of my time on behalf of the city, and what we encourage your engagement on when you all meet with the legislative delegation or when you all come down to Olympia during session. This is also a great indicator in how we evaluate our success from session to session. The first item on our legislative agenda is transportation, which dovetails kind of into three different items. The first is State Route 516. The city secured funding in the 2015 Connecting Washington package to complete improvements to SR 516 from Jenkins Creek to 185th. Since then, the cost for the project has increased. The first increase was realized in 2022 during the midst of the legislative session when the city went out to bid for the project. The bids were $7 million more than what we allocated to the project. The city agreed to contribute about $2 million of that, and we worked with the legislative delegation to secure the remaining $5 million needed. We were successful in doing so, but unfortunately, we were faced with yet another cost increase to this project. So we will be working with the legislature to secure an additional $1 million towards the project to close the gap and move forward on construction. The second transportation item is for Highway 18. The city is a part of the Southeast Area Legislative Transportation Coalition, CLTC, and played a vital role in securing funds within the most recent transportation package, Move Ahead Washington, for widening and safety improvements to Highway 18 from Issaquah Hobart Road to Deep Creek. This is a $665 million project, and WashDOT expects for construction to begin by 2025. As I had stated earlier, the transportation budget is in a deficit, and until the legislature identifies a source of revenue to replace the depleting gas tax, the state will continue to be in this predicament. It also means that we must continue to play defense and ensure that funding for Highway 18 does not go anywhere. So we will continue to include this as a top priority. Another issue that stems from the transportation budget deficit is the lack of maintenance and preservation investment made at the state level. So as the legislature considers ways to replace the gas tax with road usage charge or some other mechanism, cities remain unified in asking for a dedicated portion of those revenues to support maintenance and preservation needs at the local level. The next priority on the agenda is extended planning deadlines. There are many cities struggling to meet the deadlines associated with the housing and land use bills that have passed into law over the last couple of years. Although this certainly is a problem, the legislature is showing little to no interest in bringing this issue up for discussion in 2024. From our understanding, they do not want to resurface this issue. It was extremely difficult to get a consensus on in the first place. And they will receive pushback from affordable housing groups or for any type of planning deadline extensions. With elections coming up, this doesn't help us either. But we will continue to vocalize the challenge and take any opportunities that may come about during the session to elevate this issue. The next item is a $750,000 request for Jenkins Creek Trail. We requested $2 million for the trail last year. We received $250,000. So we will be asking once again for funding to support this project. I say that with the caveat that it is indeed a supplemental budget year. So there is less of a funding opportunity, but if we don't ask, we definitely won't get it. So we're certainly going to go for it. The next priority is another issue communities face with the numerous housing bills that have passed over the last several years. Specifically, this has to do with House Bill 1220, which passed in 2021 and significantly enhance the responsibility of cities around planning for housing growth. The regional coordination on this has become challenging, and we are highlighting this issue for the legislature. We are in the process of meeting with PSRC and others to try and get to the bottom of it and figure out what next steps need to be taken, if any, during the legislative session. Lastly, the city has included public safety as a top priority and has for a few years now. However, our messaging has shifted a bit to reflect the major and concerning cost increases for public safety services. We are joined by other communities echoing the same concern. That is why AWC Association of Washington Cities will be pursuing an update to the existing local option public safety sales tax to allow implementation by councilmanic authority and provide flexibility for revenue to be used to cover costs to increase the number of officers and related programs like behavioral health and co-response teams. Cities can currently implement this sales tax up to 1/10 of 1% with voter approval. So this proposal would change that law to allow council to impose the tax and up to 3/10 of a percent rather than limiting it to the 1/10. I'm happy to provide more information if the council is of interest of this and wants to join this coalition, but I will let you know that this is neighboring city of Kent's only priority for the legislative session. We can go to the next slide. The second document is the policy document, which in contrast to the city's priorities is a much longer list that captures several city government issues that the legislature may take action on and kind of serves as a guide on how the city would like to engage in those spaces. The policy document also provides direction to myself and city staff on issues that are of interest but don't rise to the level of a top priority. We do engage the legislative delegation on these issues, but tend to do so on a lesser level and depending on the committees the members are engaged on. As you all know, I share frequent written reports during session, and many of the issues highlighted in the policy document are also included in that. So you remain up to speed on any and all movement that may be occurring on in those spaces. This is also a place to identify long-term objectives or other policy statements that you would like for us to explore in future years. This document list has been carried over year after year. We tweak, we refine, and it reflects what is important to the city and what we anticipate to be brought up during session. I will note some of these statements are broad statements, and within those statements, there is an inherent gray area that we navigate, and we use those broad statements as direction while working closely with Mr. Boley and pull on our years of experience representing the Covington community to take a position that best meets the needs of the city. Much of this is carryover from previous years with just some adjustments, like I said, so I'll just highlight one new item on the document. There is an added statement related to insurance costs. In recent years, we have seen legislature increase the rates of insurance costs for local governments and cities specifically. So this statement highlights that additional costs and calls on the legislature to not advance any proposals that expand liability or drive up costs for cities. We can go to the next slide. So following tonight's meeting, since these documents have already been approved by you all, we will now meet with the 47th legislative delegation to brief them on these priorities. That will be occurring at the beginning of December. The Senate has legislative committee days on November 30th and December 1st, and then the House will meet on December 4th and 5th. And this is when legislators are in Olympia for committee meetings and receive briefings on the major issues for the upcoming session. And before you know it, the first day of the 2024 legislative session is here, starting on January 8th, and it'll conclude on March 7th. And we can go to the next slide. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does council have any questions for Holly? John?
Just quickly, you mentioned a number of cities are concerned about meeting those legislative mandates for planning. And I'm just wondering, what are the penalties if we miss it? Do we lose grant funds, or, I'm just curious, what's the cost going to be?
I don't have an answer for you on that yet. It's a regional approach, a lot of these guidelines. And I think they're all navigating and trying to figure out what to do next and how to how to work with you all in that space.
No.
So it's kind of a big question mark at this point, and that's why we're meeting with PSRC to get to the bottom of it.
Great, that'd be helpful, I think, for helping the city to prioritize if we do have to pick between different deadlines, you know, which one's gonna ding us the least, so.
Certainly.
Thank you, Sean. Anybody else? Holly, thank you for all the hard work that you do down there, and definitely keep up the good work. We look forward to partnering with you next session.
Looking forward to it. And city action days are, I think I put it on there, January 24th and 25th. So if you all want to come, I am there, and we're gonna tackle some meetings.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Next is a presentation about environmental health disparities. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you. And there you go. Okay, thank you for inviting me here tonight. My name is Jennifer Sable, and I work for the Washington State Department of Health. And I'm here to share with you about our environmental health disparities map. I'll share a little bit of history and the overview. I have a few screenshots of Covington and what it looks like to show you. And then I'll talk about how others have been using it for their work. I will say that the goal of it is really to use health and environmental data to help folks make decisions about where to target resources, both financial and programmatic resources. So I could, let's see, I think I can. Okay, so the history of the map, it began in 2017 with a series of listening sessions in community. These were organized by an organization that's called Front and Centered. They're based out of Seattle, and they represent communities of color, immigrant populations, 60 different organizations across the state. And they really felt the call to action from the communities that they represent. So they organized listening sessions. The stars sort of show you where those listening sessions were. In 2017, there were 11 of them, I believe. And then in 2020, we had a couple extra, those were hybrid meetings, mostly in 2020. Yeah, and they were 2-hour conversations where we heard from communities about their concerns about climate, about environmental issues, about things they're really concerned about. And that formed the basis for what we put into the map that we created. Let's see. Okay, so this is just a high level timeline. The work to develop the map happened between 2017 and 2019. It was a collaboration between academia, community, and government, and really started with those listening sessions that I mentioned. There were organizations, Department of Ecology was partnered with us, University of Washington, their environmental division or office, whatever they call it, was involved. The Puget Sound Clean Air Agency was involved in the work. And so we had the listening session, we reviewed literature about things that we know cause environmental concerns and what are related to that. We looked at existing things that other maps that already exist. There's one that the EPA has called EJ Screen. California had one at that time. And so we just met to decide what the best indicators would be, what we had data access to that we could show at a statewide level. We held a couple of community listening sessions after we had developed a draft to get further impact input, and then we launched the initial tool in January of 2019. The map consists of 19 different measures currently. They're grouped into 4 different themes. We call them environmental exposures, environmental effects, sensitive populations. These are meant to represent populations that are more sensitive to environmental contaminants, and socioeconomic factors. The yeah, so I'll just stop there with that. And then basically there's a theoretical model. We used a similar one to California, where the overall risk is a combination of those environmental threats and the population's vulnerability to those threats. We know that, there are certain populations that are just more vulnerable to different conditions. So we wanted to be able to represent that. And then all of those 19 different indicators are rolled into one overall risk. They are displayed at the census tract level. A census tract is a geography that represents between 5,000 and 8,000 people. And those are defined by the census. Yeah, so that's the model. It's based on a cumulative impact model, which basically tries to recognize that none of those 19 indicators or measures on the map exist in isolation. We know that there are combinations of built environment where you live and population vulnerabilities, and it just I guess just recognizes, that both of those exist together and not in isolation. And based on research, we also know that these type of models increase the likelihood that disadvantaged communities will receive the resources that they need. So this is what the overall model, the map looks like on our website. Obviously, this is just the state level, and you have to drill down to see Covington, and I'll show you that in a minute. So all the 19 different measures, those 4 different groupings of measures, and the overall score, they're ranked on a score from 1 to 10. So a 1 is the least risk, a 10 is the highest risk. There are 1,450 some odd census tracts in Washington, so they're more or less equally divided between the different 10 ranks. So if a community was ranked 8, about 10% of the communities in Washington will also have an 8. And 70% will have a 7 or lower, and 20% will have a 9 or a 10. So that's kind of how it works. And then, so I don't know if you can see the little census tract that is outlined in yellow on the screen. That is when I have selected that particular census tract, it's showing you the overall rank of those 19 indicators on that. And then in the pop-up bar on the left-hand side, it shows you that overall rank. It shows you the rank for the 4 different groupings of indicators. And then you can also select, like in this case, I selected the environmental exposures. Then the map refreshes and shows you the ranks for all of the census tracts for just the environmental exposures. Then you can also drill down and see all of the 19 different indicators and how they rank. So you can see like what is sort of driving the environmental exposures to be higher out of the different indicators there. One of the other helpful things that we have, if you look at the little icon on the top of that pop out bar, it's sort of 3 stacked squares. Those are our map features. And on this slide, those map features are just overlays of information that provide additional context if you're concerned about one particular thing. On this one, I just highlighted the city limits so you can see sort of where Covington is on the map. And I also included licensed childcare centers on that. That is useful if you're doing a particular project where you're concerned that daycare centers might be close to or in an area that has environmental contamination, then you could use that, for example. And there are a bunch more map features that I didn't show on that particular snapshot. This graph shows that there is an impact from these different rankings, basically. So it's showing you life expectancy for the 10 different ranks. It shows that there's a 5-year discrepancy between the communities that are ranked 1 with the least rank have a 5-year life expectancy that's 5 years higher than those communities in the 10. And so just reinforces the idea. Yes.
And Covington's an 8.
Covington is an 8.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or at least that one
That
census
part.
tract that I looked at. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a question on that. So is that an outline of, you said the census tract is 5 to 10,000 population, but we're at 22. That
Yeah.
wasn't all of Covington, right? That was just
right.
part of.
That was
yeah, okay,
just
that's
one
fine.
of those census tracts. Yeah.
I think both
So
of
there
ours are 8s. I think, yeah.
Part was an 8, part was a 7.
So I just want to share that the EHD map is a work in progress. We actually got some funding from the Healthy Environment for All Act, which was passed by the legislature in 2021. It's an environmental justice bill, I guess, or statute now. And provided some funding for us to continue to maintain and further develop this map. We know that those 19 indicators don't represent everything. All of the environmental concerns that there are, those are like sort of what we thought was most important at the time and what we had access to. I should also add that what we encourage people to do is to use this map as like a starting place and then add additional local data that you have or that you know of to that information to talk with communities in your city about what's concerning to them. So it's a starting place. It's not meant to be the only decision maker here. We recognize that. So what we are funded to do is to engage with communities further and tribes and researchers and the Environmental Justice Council, which was created by that HEAL Act. And to develop a methodology that will track the disparities over time. Right now, it's kind of a snapshot of the data that we are showing at that time, but it doesn't show anything over time. So we're working on that. We will be updating the map every 3 years, adding new indicators and other tweaks to it. We are also funded to expand some online videos and guidance to help people be able to use it. So we're working on that. And then provide consultations specifically to the state agencies because those are the ones mentioned in the statute that they have to abide by those regulations. And then I just wanted to share a few ways that communities are using it. So we know that state agencies are using it, county governments are using it, city governments are using it for a variety of things. One, just to identify the communities that are in need, to prioritize outreach to them, to do equitable funding distribution to the communities that are more in need for resources. And the other things listed there. And that's really all I have for you. So I'm happy to take any other questions that you
Council
have.
have any questions for Jennifer? Beth?
So I'm taking a look at our vision for our city, and it's a vibrant, engaged community with economic strength, a healthy and safe environment, and exceptional services for all. I am a little surprised that we got an 8. I mean, I'm not saying that what you're saying is incorrect, but I'm wondering, are there going to be opportunities that you know of to get grant funding or some other way that we can not be an 8? You don't know what I mean? So is
Yeah.
there any kind of other direction for future?
Sure. I
Okay.
mean, I think the target of the HEAL Act was really at the state agencies, so ecology, DNR, agriculture. I can't remember all 7 of them off the top of my head, but those are the main ones. So what they're targeted to do is really try and correct those disparities that we see in the state. And they're doing that through the funds that they have, grant funding, giving communities that do have 8, 9, 10s, priority to get the access to those resources.
Sean?
Yeah, Jennifer, I appreciate your being here tonight and presenting on this. I had asked that this be put on the agenda so that the council and the staff can see the types of tools that other entities are using to help make decisions when perhaps you have competing interests that for all intents and purposes are equal, except for perhaps where they're located. So, if you've got a community that for the most part is a 1 or a 2, and you've got another that's an 8 or a 10, you might want to put your resources there, and that it's a defensible tool you can use to help make those tools. And ecology is using it all the time for how we allocate certain grants and funds. And if we have to, we have limited funds, so we have to make sometimes hard decisions on which projects get those funds. And we're using this tool almost every day. I guess the only thing on the next iteration is it's really good for ecology, those census tracts, but for a city, it's really hard because we fit basically in 2. And you can't really, the community's all with it. So getting more granularity, if there's a way to do that, I think that would help us a lot. But yeah, I appreciate you coming and at least because we've started to have conversations about equity and distribution of services. Most notably, one that came and I remember was distribution of our parks. How do we determine where to put our money and resources for establishing new parks, for example? And we've done some surveys, but tools like this would be really helpful to say, oh yeah, that community is overburdened, vulnerable. Maybe a natural area would help offset and lower that number from an 8 to a 6. So anyway.
Right.
Jeff?
The data in the map, that's being, collated together to present the information, is it coming from a variety of sources?
It is, yeah.
And is that updated in the same cadence as the map itself? Or if I'm looking at it today, would some of that data be potentially more than the last update of the map?
Yeah, because there are so many people using the map, like we don't want to update it too frequently because that changes everything for people. So that's why we decided to go with the 3-year update. So there are more recent data for some of the data that we have in the map.
And then probably some that's older too, depending on how frequently the data source is updating their data? Would
Yeah.
that be accurate? Okay.
Yeah, it's
All
kind of a variety of.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome.
Anybody else? Jennifer, thank you very much for bringing this forward. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Gives me something new to look at. Thank you. All right, next up is our first public comment period. Speakers will state their name, address, and organization. Comments are directed to the city council, not the audience or staff. Comments are to be related to city business. Comments are not intended for for attendees. I added a new line here, so pardon me. Comments are not intended for conversation or debate and are limited to no more than 4 minutes per speaker. For attendees participating virtually, click the raise hand button in Zoom. For attendees participating by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Once the city grants you permission to speak, press unmute if participating virtually, or dial *6 to unmute if participating by phone. Excuse me. Notice to all participants pursuant to state law RCW 42.178.555, campaigning for any ballot measure or candidate in City Hall and or during any portion of the council meeting, including the audience comment portion of the meeting, is prohibited. With that, I don't see anybody signed up on here to speak. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to address council this evening? Is there anybody online wishing to address council? Please raise your hand. Seeing nobody raise their hand, this public comment period is closed and we will have a second opportunity towards the end of our meeting. Next up is approval of the consent agenda, items C1 through C9. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor state aye. Any opposed? The consent agenda has been approved. Next up is new business. It's a public hearing to receive comment, to receive public testimony regarding proposed fiscal year 2024 budget. This being the date set and proper notices having been posted and published in accordance with state and local law, the public hearing is hereby declared open. And Casey, do you have any updated information for us?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Tonight is just one of the first of 2 public hearings that we have on the proposed budget. There's no staff report for this one, so it's just any questions that you may have after the hearing is closed. Thank you.
Thank you. The ground rules for public comment during the public hearing are as follows. When your name is called, step up to the microphone, give your name, and state whether you are a resident of the city of Covington. Please limit your comments to 4 minutes. The city clerk will set a timer that will go off when your time is up. When the timer goes off, please wind up promptly. Let's see, the timer has fallen. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to address council on the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 2024? Anybody in the audience wishing to address council? Is there anybody online wishing to address council regarding the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget? Seeing nobody approach the podium or raise their hand, I will declare this public hearing closed. Does council have any questions for Casey on this budget? I know it comes back to us in December for final vote. Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know, Casey, if you were privy or heard our conversation with the Health and Human Services Commission, but they asked about the possibility of funding a assessment or survey, and we were looking for potential possibly funding that in this budget. So just wanted to give you a heads up and looked at potential costs of $25,000-$30,000. So anyway.
Just to chime in a little bit, we had discussed that there was the $30,000 that the Human Services Commission currently has unallocated for next year, that they were going to use potentially, like if they have a provider that comes in with their goals higher or things of that nature. But they do currently have that $30,000 that's unallocated. I can't speak for them whether or not that's what they want to use it for, but that we do have that. And then also we have the HB 1590 that we're looking into. I don't believe it would qualify for that, but I need to research that resolution just a little bit more.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? All right, Casey, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Next is new business item number 2, to consider an appointment for Equity, Cultural and Social Justice Commission. Does council wish to take action tonight?
I would like to move to appoint Nan Tet to the Equity, Cultural and Social Justice position to fill position number 9 with a term expiring September 30th, 2025.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to appoint Nan Ket to fill position number 9 on Equity, Cultural and Social Justice Commission with a term expiring September 30th, 2025. Beth, would you like to speak to your motion?
I really appreciated her. Well, she has a great background in equity and advancing other folks that are might be considered needing that extra help, immigrants and so forth. As far as her passion for the city, she's been here over 10 years. And she wants to step up and get involved. I liked some of the comments that she made about, making people feel more included, having a strategy that we can connect with people more than just handing out a flyer when it comes to events. And I really appreciated her answer about not living in one's own bubble, taking time to connect with other people that you might not interact with regularly because they're outside of your normal social group. And the way that we can build our community is by outreaching each other and getting to know each other. So I think she would be a great fit.
Thank you, Beth. Joe, would you like to speak to your second?
I just want to echo on what Beth said, that I think one of the best answers we had, because one of our questions is, please explain why you're interested in serving on the Equity, Cultural and Social Justice Commission. And I think she gave one of the best answers I've ever heard. Diversity is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. It's, you're going to go out there and you're going to learn about someone else's culture with the hopes that they're going to come back and learn about your culture as well. You're working together. And I think that's one of the best answers we've heard. And she's wants to get out there and spread diversity and make sure that we're all learning from each other. So I think that's a great thing that's needed on that committee.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anybody else wishing to speak for or against it? Okay. It's been moved and seconded to appoint Nan Ket to fill position number 9 on the Equity, Cultural and Social Justice Commission with a term expiring September 30th, 2025. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Congratulations to Nan. Next up is new business item number 3. Consider approving an ordinance relating to camping and use of public property. Mark. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you so very much. Good evening, Mayor Wagner and council members. I'm Mark Orthman, the city attorney for Covington, and tonight we'll be getting into a proposed ordinance regarding camping regulations on public property. And so what's the issue here that we're talking about? And it's the increased use of public property that interferes with the intended use of that property. And oftentimes that comes in the form of people camping in parks, on streets and sidewalks. And it's created health hazards and different issues throughout up and down the West Coast. And jurisdictions have taken a variety of approaches to combating this issue, and one of which has been to control the time, place, and manner that people can camp on public property. And that's what this ordinance is before you tonight for your consideration. Is it's really getting into where and how people can camp on public property, and mostly by saying that they can't, because that's what we're trying to avoid, and hopefully be able to help address some of the issues by helping to connect them with shelters and otherwise. So that's really what the purpose of this is. It's to appropriately regulate camping within city limits, because as the city has invested heavily in its roads and its parks and everything else, I know that city council at the summit expressed strong desire to be able to have some more control over that than maybe we currently have under the ordinances as they stand. So after discussing this extensively with Chief Easterbrook, the ordinance, it provides an important tool for staff and for our police department to be able to hopefully not only prevent safety and health issues for the people wishing to use parks and public spaces, but also to connect the homeless individuals who are living or staying in those public spaces. And the reason why we're actually bringing this ordinance is because recently, I should probably move my. This is why we're here. I just went through this and the ordinance purposes, but the real reason, and one of the main reasons, is because the legal landscape has shifted over the past since 2018. And this comes down to the Ninth Circuit and two cases that were recently decided. And they came out of the cities of Boise and Grants Pass, Oregon, Boise, Idaho, and Grants Pass, Oregon. So what happened to these cases, and the reason why the framework has been adjusted now is because in the Martin v. Boise State case, or City of Boise, excuse me, apologize to the Broncos fans out there, to the City of Boise, Boise banned camping on all public property and made it a crime. What ended up happening is when they tried to enforce that, there was a lawsuit brought against the city, and the Ninth Circuit ended up holding that it was unconstitutional to enforce that prohibition on camping against homeless individuals when they have not confirmed, but the city has not confirmed that there's alternative available shelter. So that became the test for a couple of years. It's saying, well, you can prevent people from camping on public property, but first you have to make sure, you have to confirm that there are alternative spaces for them to go to. And it doesn't count as an alternative. It doesn't count as an alternative for them, and they aren't able to take advantage of that if they would be violating the rules of that institution. So if it was a drug-free location and they were consuming drugs or otherwise, that would still be considered an available shelter for the purposes of the ordinance, because it's really making sure that you can connect people with the right resources in the right place. And since then, there's been more litigation over this issue, and in Johnson v. City of Grants Pass, once again, Grants Pass made some efforts to prevent homeless individuals from camping within their parks. And what they essentially did was they banned all sleeping materials that you could use, bedding, sleeping bags. Otherwise, saying, "Oh yeah, you can sleep in the park, but you can't actually use anything that would be otherwise a rudimentary protection." And Grants Pass in Eastern Oregon in wintertime is quite cold, and the court took the city to task for that. But what they really did is they made, and what the city in that case argued, is that they made it a civil issue. They said, no, we're not making this a criminal issue. We're not punishing it. It's a civil infraction. No worries. We're not doing anything. And the court once again said, no, if you violate the civil infraction, it can become a criminal issue. So there is a possibility of if someone is camping at a public property, that it will become a criminal issue at the end of the day. And they went straight back to the City of Boise reasoning of saying, you first have to confirm that there is available alternative shelter before you can enforce the camping ordinances. And what the court really emphasized in both these cases, they're not saying that the cities can't control time, manner, and place. What they're saying is if you're going to ban it everywhere at all times, you need to make sure that you are confirming alternative shelter. And that means that cities still have a lot of leeway to take certain classes of property and certain types of property and be able to control or prohibit and enforce this ordinance at all times on those. And that's really what the ordinance is here for. It's both camping and storage of personal property is prohibited on public property, but it's only 100% enforced in parks, because I know council has expressed strong desire and has made a commitment financially and otherwise to making our parks as good as best they can be. So the prohibition applies in all times, in all parks, that there is no camping or storage of personal property that is allowed. Now, for the rest of city property and public property, that's when the city staff will have to confirm that there's available shelter. There's reasonably available shelter that is available to be used. So it kind of sets up the city into two classes of property. You have park property that's saying there's never going to be camping there. This will always be enforced in parks. And then it has other city property that with the city will be required to confirm available alternative shelter before enforcing it and potentially bringing criminal charges against someone for violating it. And that's what the penalty really is for this. It does become a criminal misdemeanor, which is punishable by up to 90 days in jail and $1,000 fine in both. But that's a discretionary thing that's based upon prosecutorial discretion. So it's not necessarily every single person violating this is going to get arrested for camping on public property. And that's what I've been working with Chief Easterbrook on, and he's been drafting right now, is the ordinance that authorizes the chief to adopt policies and procedures. And that will include how the police are going to interact, how they're going to use our human services, the community care specialist, and work to not only trying to defer and make it so it's not something that becomes an arrestable issue, but also if there is a problem, being able to document and confirm that the available alternative shelter, so we can stay within the constitutional requirements that the courts have laid out for us. So the important takeaways here, really, we're really trying to promote public health, safety, and welfare, because we want to make public property, we want it to be able to be used for what it was intended for. Parks are meant to be recreated in, and they're meant to be a safe spot where everyone can enjoy. And when you have encampments, it can oftentimes, if there are usually not adequate bathroom facilities, and it creates health and safety hazards. And what this does is the ordinance prohibits camping in public parks at all times. And I'm just reiterating that to make sure that we're completely clear. And then in all other public property, you have to confirm the availability of alternative, reasonably available shelter space. And so the enforcement of the ordinance, again, doesn't mean that everyone will get arrested. This is creating another tool in our toolkit, because while this has been a growing problem in Covington and otherwise, this is making sure we have the proactive measures in place that if the issues really come up and become worse, that we're able to react, that we're not reacting and taking months to get something on the books when we need to be taking action. And once again, this is giving Covington's police department more tools and flexibility to regulate camping on public property than what we currently have. And it's making sure that we're still within the bounds of the Constitution. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council have any questions for Mark? Debbie?
Thank you, Mark, and I appreciate all of the due diligence and research you did in putting this together. So if we are banning it in all parks at all times, and it does not depend on whether or not there are shelter or space available for the individual, I'm guessing that because the way our police department interacts with our community care specialists, that would happen in most instances anyway, where if we're going to cite an individual, would you, while your policy does not dictate that you call and check for shelters, would you do that if you've got the time available with your officers?
I'll let the chief answer that, but
Okay.
I believe that's standard operating procedure as it is, right?
The goal is gonna be to lead with the community care specialist. So if someone is in need of shelter, that's gonna be the goal to try to remedy that problem. One of the issues that we're trying to address is people that create encampments such as we had in Jenkins Creek under the bridge. That's just unacceptable on a lot of levels, with the river or the creek being polluted, and just all the filthy garbage that was in there. We want to be able to prevent that by immediately addressing that, and removing any kind of hazard. And if enforcement is needed to remove that kind of person, we would have that tool available. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Anybody else? Sean?
Thanks, Mark. I've got a list of questions here. I'm just so just so I'm clear, we're banning it in parks all time because we have other city property that they could go to. So if there's not a shelter available, if they're in a city park, there's not a shelter available, they would be asked to basically, well, they could get a citation, but they could basically move to other city property.
Yes.
Okay, I just need to be clear about that they may move to, and it'd be interesting to have a map at some point. So we know, because I know people will call and say there's people camping and that might be legal, where they are. So I'd be curious to see where those sites are. And any, indication that, was it Martin v. Boise or Johnson v. Grants Pass are being appealed? Because I know the Ninth Circuit, the court, like Supreme Court likes to fight the Ninth Circuit.
The United States Supreme Court denied the petition for cert
Okay.
in the Boise case, and I
So
don't
let that
recall.
stand.
It let that, so it made it so the Ninth Circuit's ruling
It's
is the law
national.
of the land
Okay.
for us. We fall under the Ninth Circuit. There are 13 circuits, and the West Coast is all impacted by
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
I do not recall whether the Grants Pass case was being appealed, but I could find that information out for you. But
Yeah,
I don't
I'd just be
believe they were
curious.
seeking cert.
Okay. And thank you for the clarification on how it would be implemented. I appreciate that. It sounds like it's basically gonna be following stuff that we're already doing, policy, basically trying to find those services. I think for the record, I just wanted to say, this is about protecting our parks, but also finding ways to get people that need services, those services. So, it can come across as punitive what we're doing, but I think it's also creating incentives to get them to utilize the support and help that's available out there. One of the things in the ordinance, it talks about you can prohibit sitting, lying, or sleeping at certain times. So we are going to prohibit camping full-time in our parks. Does that include lying, sitting, sleeping?
It likely would, yes.
So anytime if you take a nap in our parks, you could get cited by this?
I don't think that's what.
That's not the
would-
intent. Yeah,
It's not the intent, and it's really about the camping piece.
Okay.
And I think I misspoke there a second ago,
Mhm.
because the definition, and I received a question about this earlier, the definition of camping really includes when you're using camp paraphernalia, when
Okay.
you're using the things that would normally be associated with that. When you have bedroll, when you have blankets, when you have pillows, when you have a tent, when you're going through that kind of thing. But if people are sleeping and they are taking a nap in the park, that is not going to be a crime.
couple more, if you indulge me. There's been conversation about who prosecutes these. So would it be the city that prosecutes these, or is it the county?
It would be the city prosecutor,
Okay.
because these are only misdemeanors.
Okay.
None of these are felonies unless there was a felony crime discovered during the course of anything that was happening within one of the public properties.
Because I know that's something the public will ask us about too, is who's prosecuting. I know there's other legal precedent related to homelessness, and I don't remember if it was a state or a federal case related to people living in their vehicles, and that they could not be towed because it was legally their home. Or do we know if these ordinances, it says it prohibits the building of structures, but how long before that structure or car or whatever becomes their home, and then we're the possibility that we're hamstrung from moving it? I know we've had conversations about over here at the Calhoun pit, there always seems to be materials there like bedding, other camping materials, and we haven't removed those because there was concern that that was prohibited by court action. So I'm just wondering, is this going to be in conflict with that?
Short answer is no, because the case you're referencing is State v. Long, and what they found is that someone who has been living within their car, that essentially becomes their homestead. And that when you level up fines against them, that it becomes punitive in a way that doesn't make sense. So that's with an entirely different section of our code for how vehicles are impounded. And Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but the police department does have a full set of procedures of what they need to do before they will tow a vehicle or remove it when someone's inside of it.
Yeah, I mean, we would make every attempt to verify there's somebody inside of it before we would even impound it, and that's on any vehicle. So, and if somebody is in it, we would provide proper notice for that person that we intend to impound the vehicle. But we would not ever tow it if somebody's inside of it, because that's not permitted, and a tow company also would take it.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. So basically what I'm understanding, any structure or camping paraphernalia or anything like that in a park, we basically we can clean that up. So this is great. I appreciate this part of the ordinance. I'm wondering, finally, the liability concerns both with doing this and not doing this. So let's say we don't pass an ordinance like this, someone camps in our parks or on our public property and gets injured, or somebody else gets injured, you know, would the city be liable for, could the city be liable for damages because we basically allowed that camping to go on?
So I appreciate the question. I would prefer to answer that outside of a public meeting. That would get into attorney-client privileged issues that and scope of liability that isn't appropriate for a public discussion.
Sure. That's it.
Thank you, Sean. Anybody else? Okay, we have an ordinance. Yes, Beth.
So I just one other clarifying question as I'm thinking through. So camping on a park, you need to move. Okay, great. And they move to a field or a sidewalk or some such now. Now, the next night, maybe they see them there again, then we end up trying to verify, which we would have done the first night, that there was shelter. But they're not required to take shelter to get off of the park property. They will be if they're on a private piece of property or another piece of public property. So we're moving them one night, and the next night we might just be having to give them a misdemeanor or force them to, we need to offer them shelter the next night anyway, right? So it might just be delaying the inevitable, to Sean's point, if they're gonna move off of a park somewhere else, and then they end up interacting or getting serviced by our community care specialist or whatnot the next night anyway, right? So is it too much of a stretch to? It's gonna end up in the same result, I guess, is kind of where I'm at, unless they literally can find a place, can find shelter that's not camping.
So I think what the ordinance is trying to do is finding a balance between having the total prohibition and having the flexibility of seeking available shelter, because as the chief pointed out, we're going to be seeking the available shelter
Correct.
no matter what.
Right.
It's just a matter of how it can be enforced and what the ultimate penalty can be. So in a park, if there isn't available shelter, they can still be charged with a criminal misdemeanor. And that's any time at a park, if they are camping there and violating the ordinance, that can happen. If they're on all other public property, then we go through the other process of confirming available shelter and walking through that. So that's, I wouldn't necessarily say it's delaying the inevitable. I would just say it's prioritizing one kind of property as saying that this is, and I believe this is what the council brought up at the summit, this was a really major priority, was to have parks have different and greater restrictions than other kinds of property.
Thanks.
So before us is a proposed ordinance relating to camping and use of public property in substantial form as presented. Does council wish to take action tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Joe, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes. The compassionate thing to do with the people living in our parks, living on the street, is to help find them shelter. Leaving them in our parks, leaving them on the street is not a compassionate answer. Helping them find the shelter is the way to go. However, it is also a compassionate thing to ensure our parks are safe, clean, and available to use by everybody in our city and outside of our city. To ensure that, we have to make sure that there are people not using our parks for nefarious reasons or to be used as their homes. I don't want to take my kids to Covington Community Park, but realize I can't go to a certain section because someone has decided to build themselves a home in the middle of one of the trails. That's not a compassionate thing to do to our neighbors. It's not a compassionate thing to do to anyone, period. Is to take up the public land that way. But the compassionate thing to do is to find them shelter space to help get them off the streets and get them the services they may need. This is a tool in our tool belt to ensure that we're doing that. It's a tool to make sure that our residents can facilitate the parks, can use them as their intended purpose, and make sure that we are doing the right thing by our residents and by the people who are seeking that shelter, who may need it, and we can find them the help they need. I really don't want to see us having to put misdemeanor charges on them. So I hope we can always find them shelter space. But if we have to, then we have to. But it is a compassionate thing to do for everyone around.
Thank you, Joe. Debbie, would you like to speak to your second?
Thank you. I agree with everything that Joe said. I believe that this ordinance protects our residents that want to use our parks that they have paid for with their tax money. We do hear a lot from our residents that they don't feel safe in a couple of our parks because of this. But on the other side, it also helps protect our residents who do not have homes and no place to stay. So, and given the past performance of our police department and our community care specialist, we know that their first approach is always to find support for the individual. So I believe this is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Anybody else wishing to speak for or against the motion? Beth?
I think the other thing I definitely need to clarify or back up is what Debbie said about our officers, our staff. They know the compassionate way to make this happen. And I have full faith that whenever they have these types of interactions, they're coming from a place of love and respect for everybody. And I can support this because I know that it's going to be executed with the utmost grace and respect.
Thanks, Beth. Anybody else? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed ordinance relating to camping and use of public property in substantial form as presented. All those in favor state aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ordinance passes. Thank you. Thank you for a good presentation, Mark. Next up is new business item number 4, discuss the potential future funding for the construction phase of SR 516, 185th Place to Southeast 192nd Avenue Southeast project known as CIP 1128. Don.
Thanks, Mayor and Council.
Sorry.
Yeah,
It's all right. So tonight, as you introduced, we're talking about the potential future funding for the next project east of the project that's under construction right now. So basically from the Home Depot signal approximately to the entrance into Timber Lane. So as attached in your packet is a letter that we've drafted to send to PSRC. And what this is in regards to is we have right-of-way fund grant for right-of-way funds in the amount of $1,084,233 that we are trying to obligate those funds so we can start next year starting to acquire the necessary right-of-way utilizing those grant funds. We're in the design phase right now of that project, and so we'll be ready to enter into the right-of-way phase towards the spring, summer of next year. So as part of doing that, PSRC wants to make sure that the project basically will progress after right-of-way into construction and that it will be reasonably funded in order to do that. And so as we were going through this, they basically wanted some assurance that their terminology is reasonably expected funds. We talked to them numerous times about past grants and success in legislative appropriations for projects and things along those lines. However, they didn't see those scenarios as reasonably expected because you don't know. So what they wanted to have something in place that that they could be assured that the project would move forward in the future. So one of the things and the way that the letter was drafted is in talking to them is saying, hey, we have utilized bonding for projects in the past, and our current bonds that we have is coming in, basically will be paid off in 2028. And so if council needed to at that time, if we haven't had success in getting funding, then we could consider bonding in order to fund the project or a portion of that. And so that is what the letter is drafted to do. And it sounded like they would be okay with that as a reasonably expected funding. I will, one suggested edit on the letter in your packet is on the second paragraph on what is page 114 of your packet. It says the city of Covington plans to apply for grants leading up to the construction of this project. If the pursuit of grants is successful, the city plans to procure bonds to account for the cost of construction. And a suggestion I was going to make is the city can procure bonds to account for the cost of construction versus saying plans to. And that just basically gives the ability to, that you're not having to make the decision now that you're for sure bonding, but we're just saying that, hey, that's a tool that we could go to if we needed to. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or anything, or if there's any concerns that council has with us sending this letter. Jennifer.
One suggestion, I'm wondering if it would be helpful to include our bond rating just to show that it's not a problem for us to get a bond.
Okay.
Also, I knew something would be coming up with the bond getting paid off in the near future, but this is worthy if necessary. Thank you.
Debbie.
Thank you, Don. And just to clarify, in our blue sheet, it says the current bond debt will be paid off in 2027. You had said a few minutes ago it was 2028, but aren't we on track for 2027?
Yeah, I think the way that I was looking at it is it's being paid off in 2027, and we were just saying bonding, we could in 2028 would be coming back available in 2028.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so you are looking for us to approve this letter to move forward to send it to PSRC?
Basically, just if there's any concerns that you guys have prior to us sending this based on that.
Does council have any concerns? Nope. Okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for bringing it to us. And Don, thank you. Next up is new business item number 5, to discuss the 2024 appointments to regional forums and to make appointments to that. Let's start with, I'm going to jump down to Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority. Sean, you wish to stay on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. And then we'll go back up to the top, Metropolitan Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee, MISMAC. Currently we have Don and Shelley on that. Does any council members wish to do that? It's on the second Friday of the month. Don and Shelley, or Don, are you and Shelley able to continue doing that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Then we'll move to skateboard. Debbie, you are currently the member of that. Do you wish to stay on that, or is there anybody else wishing any desire to join skateboard?
I'm happy to.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie. And is Bob able to stay as the alternate?
Yes.
Thank you. And pick, Joe, you are currently the member. You wish to stay as member.
Yes, I do.
Okay, and I believe Christina wanted to stay as alternate. Next is Ryra 9. Jennifer, you're currently the member. You wish to stay as the member.
Yes.
And Sean, do you wish to stay as the alternate?
Yes.
Next is Skip, South King Housing and Homeless Partners. Christina is listed as the member and Debbie is the alternate, and you spoke with Christina and she said she had a desire to stay as, and you wish to stay as alternate.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so to reiterate for the record, Metropolitan Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee for 2024 member will be Don Vondren, alternate will be Shelley Bates. For South County Area Transportation Board, 2024 member will be Debbie Hartsock and alternate will be Bob Linskoff. Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee, 2024 member will be Joseph Simomo. 2024 alternate will be Christina Soltis. Water Resource Inventory Area 9, known as RIRA 9 Forum. The 2024 member will be Jennifer Harjehausen, alternate will be Sean Smith. Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority, the member will be Sean Smith. South King Housing and Homeless Partners, known as SKIP. The 2024 member will be Christina Soltis, alternate will be Debbie Hartsock. With that, I would look to, and then the other ones on the backside are for appointments through SCA only. So those will be being brought back through the SCA pick and the board. So with that, I'd look for a motion to appoint the council members to regional forums as listed.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second? I have two moves.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to appoint the council members to the regional forums as stated. You want to speak to your motion, Debbie?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Beth, okay. Anybody else wish to speak for or against the motion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. You like this back?
No.
Thank you. Next is new business item number 6. Appoint the voting delegate for the 2023 Sound Cities Association annual meeting. We have the annual meeting coming up on Wednesday, December 6th. I believe right now Debbie and I are going. Is anybody else attending? Anybody else?
Go ahead and sign me up.
Okay.
Please, thank you. Sorry.
We had that conversation during our
I know.
interview. Okay. Does council wish to take action to see who the voting delegate would be to represent the city at the 2023 SCA annual meeting? I am happy to do it if no one else wants to.
That's what I was gonna make a motion, but
Oh.
you made that really easy.
Okay,
I move to pick Mayor Wagner as our voting delegate.
Second.
okay. It's been moved and seconded to appoint Jeff Wagner as the voting delegate to represent the city of Covington at the 2023 SCA annual meeting. All those in favor state aye. Any opposed? Thank you all very much. I'll make sure and vote properly.
Mayor Wagner,
Yes.
they've also asked us this year to appoint an alternate. So
Oh.
since we have a couple of others going, we could do that.
Who would like to be the alternate?
I nominate Debbie to be the alternate.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to nominate Debbie as the alternate for
You win.
SCA. I promise to be there.
There,
Okay, all those in favor to have Debbie Hartsock as the alternate, state aye.
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 Whether
Any opposed?
she agrees to.
Okay.
it.
I didn't ask her.
This is a volunteer thing on this one.
All right. Thank you all very much. That concludes our new business for this evening. Looking at future agenda items, our next meeting is on Tuesday, November 28th. We have a 6 o'clock meeting to discuss presentation from the Code Compliance Division. And then 7 o'clock is our normal meeting. Does council have anything they would like to see at a future agenda, either later this year or even into next year? All right, let's move into council staff comments. We'll start with Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no comments.
Thank you. Don.
Nothing else tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ethan.
Nothing from me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Selena.
Oh, there I am. Hi, good evening, council. I just wanted to touch, if it was the will of the council, on the presentation that was given tonight by the health department and a couple of questions that Mayor Pro Tem Smith had and Councilmember Porter. So this was a really great presentation tonight, and I just wanted to take a moment to remind council, when we talk about, I think it was Beth's question about the health tracker, some of the work that you brought up in your conversation is really directly related to the climate action grant work that we completed back in June and the dashboard we created. And while the DOH Washington Tracking Network tool is not directly contained in our climate index, the cool thing about this, the presentation you saw tonight and the work of the climate action grant, is that the WTN tool, the one you saw tonight, really looks at, we talked about the census tracts, whereas our climate action grant tool and dashboard, which I'm happy to send out again if folks are interested, really looks more at Covington from a much smaller geographical area. So we are able to get more down into the blocks versus the census tract. And I think that was a question that was raised tonight. And also the kind of the cool thing that where these work in tandem is that the tool you saw tonight really tells you how Covington ranks from kind of across the state, from kind of census tract to census tract, where our climate grant, climate action plan dashboard will actually tell us how we rank against ourselves. So it's super cool to see a lot of these tools coming out. It's kind of the first time that we're being able to really look at this data and make some conscientious changes. So I just wanted to take a minute and remind the council of that work. That's going to be coming back to you as we start more work on the climate plan. We've got about a $500,000 grant we went out for, which we'll likely get. So there'll be a lot of climate work ahead through 2027. So more to come on this topic. I just wanted to take a minute and talk about kind of the relationship between what you saw tonight and the work that the Planning Commission's been doing the last year.
Great. Thank you, Selena.
Thanks.
Casey.
I just want to give you a quick update on the Department of Revenue reporting that I was waiting for the B&O analysis. They had mentioned it would take about 2 months. We got it yesterday. So we've just opened it. That's about it. So that's as far as we've made it. What I do find interesting though, so I'm going to touch bases with some of the surrounding cities on how they did their analysis, because the information you get from Department of Revenue is the gross sales for the business in total. So it's not just for Covington, it's statewide. So I'm gonna reach out to a couple of the cities around us and kind of see how they figured that out. How did they figure out a percentage or that type of thing? So that's just where we are. We've literally opened it and that's about it, but I'll keep you updated. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Mark.
Just briefly, I was able to confirm that petition for cert has been requested by the city of Grants Pass, and it was requested earlier this year, and they're currently going through the process of responses and everything else. There has not been a response filed yet, but it has not been decided one way or another whether the Supreme Court will hear that case.
Interesting.
And the only other thing is there is an executive session tonight to consider real estate purchase pursuant to RCW 4230-110 sub 1 sub little b.
For about how long? 15 minutes. 15. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mark. Regan.
Nothing other than just to wish you all a wonderful Thanksgiving next week, and in that vein, express gratitude for really the incredible community that we have here and this wonderful staff and exceptional city council. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Kristen.
I will just echo that and say happy Thanksgiving next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth.
Had the pleasure of attending the Veterans Day recognition and flag retirement ceremony that was hosted by Rotary and Boy Scout Troop 517, and the city helped with that, providing the venue. It's always great to have those types of ceremonies and community gathering opportunities to provide recognition. So we'll see how it goes in the future, but appreciate having Mayor to speak and Debbie and some of the others that were able to show up, and staff, Chief. So that was fantastic. And I also want to say that I know we had brought up the issue of code enforcement over the summer because of residents bringing some issues. And I know that we're going to be having that meeting in a few weeks with our code enforcement department, but over the last 2 or 3 weeks, there have been a few of those particular properties that have really done some work and are moving in the right direction. So we appreciate that. I don't know what happened. We can talk about that at that meeting, but appreciate the work that staff does, because I know that we put that ask on there.
I can send an update out to council
Yeah.
on those, but you're
Yeah.
right, there has been some good improvements.
Yeah. They were out there sawzalling their thing, and I'm like, okay, off to the dump it goes. It's great. So anyway, and
Seeing
again,
that, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I totally know.
anyway, yeah, just thank you again for all of the reports and the things that we're trying to do. I think 2023 has been a really huge year for us, you know, trying to move the meter in some regards, and it's taken a lot of work from staff. So appreciate that. Enjoy the holiday with your families. And there will also be a park cleanup at Jenkins Creek Park on Black Friday, Opt to Act through REI, from 9 a.m. to 10:30. So if you want to do some community service on Black Friday, come and join us.
Thanks, Beth. Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Got a couple things. RFA had its meeting 2 weeks ago. And at that one, we're in the similar process of as the city, I'm working on the budget. The board voted to approve the RFA's $125 million budget. So that's actually up in the past couple of years from 100 million. So the RFA is growing, and its influence and reputation throughout the region is growing as well. So so that happens. And then because of that, we've expanded and we're adding Tequila. They're getting additional delegates to the board. We'll be moving to the Kent facility starting the new year for those meetings. I've been spoiled. We've had all the meetings here in Covington Fire Station. It's only like 2 minutes from my house, and now I'm gonna have to remember I have to leave 20 minutes early just to make it on time. But anyway, congratulations to all my colleagues who won re-election. It was a close one there. Sweating it all night. And I just appreciated the Human Services meeting tonight and interview we had with Nan. It's always good to see people willing to volunteer and step up and support our community. It's always just encouraging. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Sean. Debbie.
Thank you. On the Veterans Day event, it really was an honor to talk to some of our veterans and hear their stories. When I first thought about joining council and applied for the open position, I did some research because I wanted to know more about our city that I didn't already know, and I had done digging into our demographics, and I remember that I was surprised at how many veterans we have. So I think our goal jointly for the city and the Rotary is to really get more of our veterans engaged next year. We had a lot more this year than last year. But they deserve all of our thanks and praise. And the other thing is, I'm so proud that Covington is home of the Street of Heroes, where the National Cemetery is. There are not very many cities that have the luxury of having that National Cemetery. And if you've ever been to a service there, it's phenomenal. So anyway, I just want to thank our veterans, and there may be some in city staff that we're not aware of that weren't able to come on Friday. And when I hear about anything to do with PFAS, I automatically think of Sean. But there was a really interesting story on the news last week that talked about a company that has developed a machine, so you probably already know this, that can extract 100% of PFAS out of water. And so I'm just anxious now to hear how that's gonna make its way into other bigger things than these just tanks of water. But that was pretty interesting because I've heard a lot of bad things about PFAS since I've been sitting here. So that's all I have. Oh, and I wanted to say, Regan, when you said something about Thanksgiving, my mind just went like, why is he saying that? It is next week, isn't it? Well, happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Thanks, Debbie. Jennifer.
I want to publicly congratulate our council member Soltis on, I believe, also being the first woman to have a child on council. The feminist in me loves that. What's that?
Only Jeff and I have had kids, well, since been on
Yeah,
council.
well,
Now we had Christina.
having one come out of your body is a big deal.
I was gonna say, they
My
may
wife.
look like me, but
So congratulations to her, and also wanted to, it's funny, you know, Beth was talking about the code enforcement, and so I was going to mention that as well, but not that I'd seen improvements, but as soon as you said Sawzall, because I've been honestly wondering where all of that stuff has been actually going. It disappears every day, more and more of it. But in another part of the neighborhood, in addition to that, you know, the city posted on Facebook, sent us an email about a situation with a house. There was also something behind Cedar Valley Elementary yesterday through the neighborhood. I don't want to say rumor mill, I'm fairly certain it's fact, you know, that RV that was back there filled with garbage actually came from a house that had been deserted, and the property owner was fixing it up, and maybe someone that they hired to do that anyway left that as a gift to the taxpayers and and staff of the city of Covington. And so I just wanted to bring that to light so that when we're having this conversation next time, that we're hearing from our residents about these issues and from our staff. But we need to do more because it's really affecting the community, and it's costing us a ton of money, which obviously just goes back to the residents. So anyway, I wanted to share that with everyone. It was just, you know, late breaking news yesterday, and was, you know, city staff was amazing. Thank you, chief. And I sent a thank you to Public Works, who cleaned out the RV before it was towed away. And it just, again, it's a property owner just leaving it for the city to deal with. So I'm excited to talk about code enforcement. Thank you.
thanks, Jennifer. Joe.
So we had PIC last week and there was not a quorum. So it was the shortest PIC meeting I've ever been in because it didn't officially start, but I did spend about 15 minutes on a Zoom call. So most of that stuff will come back to us at our next meeting next month, where we will also be voting to approve anyone who is appointed, who's going to be appointed to any of the commissions, which if you didn't apply, there are still 6 committees that need members because they didn't have enough. Central Puget Sound Economic Development District Board, Children and Youth Advisory Board, Domestic Violence Initiative Task Force, Healthier Here Governing Board, Joint Recommendations Committee, and the Regional Water Quality Committee. There are vacant alternate positions as well. King County Growth Management Planning Council, King County Flood Control District Advisory Committee, the Local Hazardous Waste Advisory Committee, PSRC Executive Board, and the Regional Transit Committee. I know I applied for the to be on Regional Transit again. I have a goal of getting us a second bus route in the city eventually, or getting it back, because I know we lost it a number of years ago. And I know that would help with the DOH's board, thing.
Yeah.
With that is if we can get better transit. Can't do anything about the highway running through our city, but we do something about adding some more buses. I also applied to be the vice chair for the PIC committee. Because the current chair is Bill Boyce, and he is in his second year, and so he is ineligible to be the chair next year. So Vice Chair Chris Roberts of Shoreline has said he would like to be the chair next year, and we will be deciding that in December. And then we'll see who the nominating committee puts out there for vice chair. Other than that, I wish all the best to Christina and her family. I already know that that little girl has Andre wrapped around her finger already, and she's only 3 days old. And other than that, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, eat lots of turkey, play some muddy football, and stay safe.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I've noticed first off on code enforcement, it's nice. And then a couple other houses are being cleaned up as well. And Jennifer, thank you for bringing that van to attention, or the RV to attention, to get that cleaned up. Beth, thank you for inviting me to the Veterans Day celebration on Friday. I always enjoy doing that. And I just want to say thanks to staff and all that you do. Thank you to council for all that you do and for allowing me to be your mayor. And I especially want to thank not just you in the audience, but everybody, all of our residents in Covington, for all that they do, because each of you make this a community. So thank you. And with that, we'll go into our second public comment period. Speakers will state their name, address, and organization. Comments are directed to the city council, not the audience or staff. Comments are to be related to city business. Comments are not intended for conversation or debate and are limited to no more than 4 minutes per speaker. For attendees participating virtually, click the raise hand button in Zoom. For attendees participating by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. Once the city grants you permission to speak, press unmute if participating virtually, or dial *6 to unmute if participating by phone. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to address council this evening? Is there anybody online wishing to address council? Seeing nobody approaching the podium or raising their hand, we will move into an executive session to consider real estate for approximately 15 minutes, returning by no later than 9 p.m. at which once we return, no further action will be taken. With that, we can pause the recording. It is now 8:57. We've come back from our executive session. There is no further action being taken, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.